So I figured I'd do a video here on how to buy old vehicles off of Craigslist and at auctions and stuff like that. Also a few comments on how to pick out a street rod driveline. This thing obviously doesn't look like much of a street rod, but when you lift the hood on this thing and you find that it has a 454 with an L80 R4 transmission, and is the 9800 GVW driveline. So you've got the 8-bolt wheels and the very heavy rear end and transfer case in here. All of a sudden you start to see some potential for a ground pounder of a street rod. So this would make an amazing platform for a 40s truck, or I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do with it yet. I bought it originally to put the driveline in another half-ton truck that I have, but I'm starting to think less and less it's going to end up there, and it may end up becoming a street rod. But first thing, when you're looking at buying a vehicle off of Craigslist or at an auction or anything, if you have the opportunity, talk to the owner of it. Obviously, if you're buying from Craigslist, that's going to start with a phone call. And if you at all get a weird feeling from the person that they're not all being honest, if you're talking to the owner and you get that odd feeling that they're going to rip you off, walk away. It's just not worth the hassle. But you can tell a lot from the conversation with somebody. This particular one, the guy said he bought it from a friend of his a few years back. He drove it for about 2 years. Then the brakes went out on it. So he just never got around to doing anything with it because it was so rough. But said it was his daily driver. Obviously, you go and look at the license plate, and we got a 2011 license plate there. That lines right up with what he was saying. The brake pedal goes to the floor. One chamber is empty here, so all of that lines up as being true. And hey, we got a good deal. Got out there, battery was dead, hooked up the jumper cables. It didn't turn over maybe 3 times, fired right up, sat there and idled perfect. So it's all about the conversation, and excuse me, losing my breath here, but it's about looking at things and making sure that what the person says is what it is. Now, this particular one was on there for $1,000. I talked him down to $650 before I even left the house, and I ended up handing him $650 because if I already talked somebody down on the phone, I tend not to beat them up unless what I see when I get there is different than what they told me. This guy said the interior was wrecked and the truck stank to high hell, but the tires are good. The transmission had been rebuilt when he got the truck or before he got the truck, so it's got about $50,000 on the rebuilt tranny. But we can see the mice have destroyed the interior of the thing. It stinks. It's definitely not a truck that I would ever put back on the road. But when you get looking at it, the tires on the rear are almost brand new. The tires on the front are about 50%. The engine runs beautiful. I mean, there's $1,000 or more worth of parts here. The one door here I'm going to put on the truck that's sitting right behind it. So I'm looking at the fact the bumpers are good, the doors are good. There's a lot of parts I can move to my other vehicles and justify the cost. And what I end up with is a free driveline. So once again, when you start looking at vehicles, some of the things you're going to want to watch for. Here's a real obvious one. If you look at the front tire on this here, that tire looks almost perfect. We go around to the other side. That tire looks perfect. That's a good sign that your steering is in alignment. And I can give you a real good example because my daily driver back here, the alignment is horseshit on it. So if we come and look at this tire, see how my tread is almost perfect out here, and that side is bald as a bean. This thing is out of alignment horribly. When you get into trying to align a vehicle, you could be into the $1,000 range just to get the alignment right on them. By the time you have a shop do the work, put in new bearings if they're needed, put in new steering arms and that's $1,000 worth of work. Take a quick look at those tires. If the tires look good and they look like they've been on there for a while, which obviously these have, they weren't just put on here, they've been on there for the life of the vehicle. You can tell right away you got $1,000 you don't need to spend on this thing. So that's one of the good ones to look for. The other thing is kind of ignore the body. Body doesn't matter. Yeah, if you want something shiny, that's going to make a difference. But in general, ignore the condition of the body. That doesn't really matter. Open the door, smell the interior. The smell of that interior is going to get you. If you can sit down in a car, take a nice deep breath, and you can tolerate to be there, it's something to consider buying. But if in your first gasp of air you can't breathe, forget it. Walk away. You're going to hate that car. But when you do get looking at these, especially on these full frame vehicles, always look at the entire frame. From the front all the way to the back. This one, once again, is amazingly clean on the frame for how rusty the truck is. So there's my spring, and yeah, there's surface rust there, but the actual structure of the metal is intact. When we get back here past the axle, the rear of the frame isn't quite as clean, but it's still structural. So those are very important things. If your frame's going to break in half, you can't trust driving that vehicle. But then look at all of your lights. You know, if the marker lights are smashed out, the tail lights are smashed out, there's actually physically body damage. The cops are going to look for that. The cops don't really care about rust, but if the thing looks like it's been in a demolition derby, you're going to have unwanted attention from the cops. So look for a body that's fairly straight. When you get into mechanical, obviously you're going to want to start it, drive it, run it, make sure that it drives out nice. But some of the things you want to look for, pop the reservoir for your brakes. Look at the fluid. This fluid has probably never been changed in this truck since it was built. So when it turns brown or black like that, it means it's absorbed a lot of water and a lot of rust. It means that your brake system probably is going to have to be gone through. So that could be potentially a lot of money you're going to have to, even if the thing stops beautiful now, you're looking at within the next 2 years, it's going to have a major brake failure. Excuse me. Now, next thing you want to do is look at the actual, how dirty is the engine? Has stuff been leaking? On this particular one, we're kind of getting into dusk here, so you can't see real well. But some of these hoses down here are obviously leaking. On this particular one, these are power steering. So those hoses are about 40 bucks a piece. So there's 4 of them. You know, we're getting 200 bucks just for the parts on those. There's a few other hoses that are leaking. I'm parting this thing out. I don't care. If you're not parting it out, that's potentially stuff you're going to have to do. So obviously anything that's leaking is going to cost you money. But then we get into popping the radiator. When you go out to look at a vehicle, try to get there when it's cold. So you can open up the radiator, look at the fluid in there. That's nice and green. It's right at the top where it should be. That means that this thing isn't leaking. They haven't put any stop leak in there. If it's brown, you got a problem. Now, some of the modern antifreezes are red, but once again, it should be a nice crystal clear color. It should either be red, it should be yellow, it should be green. If it looks brown, they've been putting stop leak in there. You've got potential problems. Pull your dipstick. I do not like to see brand new oil. Unless you're looking at a vehicle that is a one-owner vehicle and they've done oil changes every 3,000 miles and you can see the new filter, I don't like to see new oil. I like to see old oil in there. See this a little bit blurry on the view here, but you can kind of see the stick through it. It's somewhat translucent and brown. That's perfect. The level is right where it should be. This thing's probably got 3,000, 4,000 miles on that oil. Yeah, it's a little high compared to what some people say, but if you're running modern oils, you can get 10,000 miles on an oil change. But what I'm looking for there isn't necessarily the color of the oil. I mean, I do want to see a nice translucent color. If it's completely black and has chunks hanging on it, walk away, because the engine hasn't had oil changes regularly and it's probably hitting the end of its life. But if it looks like chocolate milk, if it's milky and gray, walk away. You got a bad head gasket, the engine's got a cracked block, cracked head, major problems. But a nice dark oil like that that's semi-translucent, no odd colors, and it's at the right level, you got a winner. You got something that's a daily driver that just hasn't had current maintenance done. Now when you get into the tranny, we got a twofer on this one. You're going to pull it, you're going to look at the color, and on this, once again, you can see it's translucent. This one's a little bit dark. It's kind of got a brown color. This can be anywhere from blood red which would be brand new, to kind of a somewhat dark color. If this is black and looks like engine oil, your tranny's probably about done. Then the next thing you need to do on this is actually smell it. And it should smell somewhat sweet. It should smell kind of like almost like a cookie or like a box of Oreos when you open the box of Oreos and you first get that whiff of sugar. If it smells burned, like a plastic bag was burning, your transmission is starting to go. Now, it doesn't mean it's junk. It just means that they probably haven't done a tranny filter in quite a while and the oil has gotten overheated. So a lot of times you can just get away with knowing that you need to put a tranny filter in and do some preventative maintenance. But if it is black and smells burned, there's a good chance that tranny is on its way out. So then the other thing you want to look at is just look at the glass, make sure all the glass is there, make sure the windows go up and down, make sure all that stuff works properly. So there's a bit of information for you. Hope it's helpful to you. And if you get out there and buy a car and works out for you, all the better. So, like I say, if you ever have a bad feeling about somebody when you're going to buy a car, just walk away. Always remember that. Don't get stuck with something you hate. Good luck to you.